So up to now we've been focusing purely on working on the feathers, bringing them into the scene and reworking the shape to form our wings. And at this stage, your wings don't need to be final. You can continue to play around with those expressions and the attributes and the sliders as much as you like, right up until the point that you're ready to render. But what I wanted to do now is actually focus on getting the wings themselves to render. I mean, if we do a render now, we can just see how the wings are looking. I'll shrink this down when it's finished. It should only take a couple of seconds. So I'll just scale this down a little bit so we can see it. So as we can see here, I'll probably change the background color a little just to so we can highlight the wings with the feathers being black. But if we switch on the alpha, that highlights it a little bit more. You see the left wing, all the feathers are rendering, but the right wing, nothing's rendering. And also, you can just make out here, we've got black feathers there, because they're the ones that we originally brought into the scene, and we clicked yes, because we wanted the shaders to come in. And these are grey, because if you remember, when we were importing those feathers, we clicked no, because we didn't want to bring in any extra shaders. Basically, all the feathers in this scene use exactly the same shader. So rather than having 16 shaders to play around with, we just want one, and that's what we're going to focus on now. But first of all, we have the issue of the right wing not showing up at all at render time. So let's just minimize that. If we look at our XGen window, so our left wing, if we remember, was set up, as you can see here, cover left is using left feathers cover, which is fine, and that's what's rendering. Go to our primary, again it's using the left feather, and the left wing we know is rendering fine. But if we go to our right wing, we go to our cover, that's also using the left feather wing archive file. So there's a clash there, so that's why that side's not rendering. If we go down to primary, again left primary, and it should be using right primary. So that's why that's not working. So let's just change a couple of these. So we want these to use the right feathers so there's not the clash of archives in the scene. So let's remove those, click add, and this time we want right primary, open. And again, we don't want any more shaders in the scene for now, so I'm going to click no. Let's go to cover. Let's just remove those and change those so that they're using right cover, A and B. Again, no more shaders. Quickly just remove these. Lower right. So those will be C and D, I think. Finally, upper right. Oh no, these were C and D. Doesn't matter. We'll just make those A and B instead. So now they're pointing to different files. If we bring up our render again, but first I will go and just brighten up using our environment setting. We'll just make the background a little bit brighter just so the wings will show up a little bit more. So if we render now, hopefully both sets of wings will show up. And there, that's worked. So previously we had the clash where both collections were using the same archives. So that's just something to show you. If you have the problem where something isn't showing up, you maybe have to use a separate archive file. Even if it's exactly the same model, you maybe need to export it as a separate archive file as well. So that's problem one out of the way. We've got all the wings are now rendering nicely. The problem is they're still grey, so we need to sort out that shader issue. But then again, we did import them and leave out the shaders. So let's look into our Hypershade. Now, as we can see here, we have two feathers here, and these are those very initial primary feathers that we brought in. And as you can see, it brought in a separate shader for each, even though they're using exactly the same material. We also have these here, which aren't really used. So let's just go to delete unused nodes, and that'll just remove anything that isn't used. So what we want is a shader that's unique that we can apply to every feather. So let's just select one of these, and we're just going to go to Duplicate Shading Network. So now we have this feathers underscore material. That's all pointing to the textures and the bump maps. So now if we go to our outliner, now because we're using a new material, we can get rid of these two here, because the material exists in this scene, and it's not something that we've brought in. So we can delete those. Now here are our collections, and here we have our wings and our various data stored underneath each one. So what I'm going to do is just open up both of these. Just make this a little bit taller. As you can see, we have the primary left wing description. That's the sort of the data, and then we have a geoshader, and the geoshader exists under every single one of these. And this is basically what is output at render time. So what we want to do is assign our new material to these geoshaders. So I'm just going to right click, assign material to selected. Down here we can see it says result, and it's assigned those to it. So let's now delete unused nodes, and those other materials have gone now because they're no longer assigned to anything. So now let's go back to our render view and let's see if they pop up with the correct shaders on. And there we go, the wings have now got the right shaders on. We can still see the proxy wings in there, so I'm just going to quickly close these down, go back to our channel box, hide the proxy wings. Let's go back to our outliner, bring back our normal wings and just do another render. But as you can see there, rather than bringing in 16 different feathers, which brings in 16 different shaders, this now gives us the flexibility so that when we come to render, if we want to, we just have this one shader here, which is just going to affect all the feathers. And as you can see in the materials down here, there's 4 different feathers and they're spread out, and each model uses different sets of UVs, that sort of thing. But it just means it's a lot quicker for us to quickly adjust the shader if we need to, rather than having to do it 16 times, one for each archive file. And there, the wings, yep, they could do with a bit more work. We could do with adjusting the sliders and the attributes a little bit more, but that's the wings basically done. And up to now, we've just shown you the process for bringing the wings in, bringing those feathers in, adjusting the attributes. I've introduced you to some very basic expressions. So from there, you can just play around with those a lot more and shape the wings, adjust the length and the width. You can even play around with the shader now, seeing as there's only one shader being used for all of the feathers. So I'm going to leave the wings here and just leave you to play around with those a lot more. And I think what we'll do in the next lesson is we will switch and look at another aspect of XGen, and by doing that we'll start to form the horse's mane and tail using splines to form long hair.